In this episode of Motive Garage presented by Sparesbox, we explore just how hard you can push the stock engine in a GR Yaris. If you watched the last episode on our GR Yaris, you'll know that pushing the car has led to pressurizing the cooling system. Now, we went over all of the symptoms and what happened in that last video, so if you haven't seen it, go and take a look. In this episode of Motive Garage, we want to take a look at the actual damage that has happened and see if we can work out a way to fix it. Now, obviously, to do that, we had to pull the head off the engine, and it's quite a fair bit of work. So our friend Craig from a Toyota dealership, who is not only a Toyota senior mechanic, he is also a race team mechanic. He has access to the entire Toyota system, so he's been doing a lot of GR Yaris work. We sent it off to him to pull the head off so we could take a look. Now, when you blow a head gasket or pressurize the cooling system, the three main things that you want to check when you pull the head off is the head and the deck of the block completely flat? You want to check if the head studs have stretched or distorted in any way, and you want to see if there is physical damage to the head gasket. So essentially, they were the three things that we were looking at when we pulled the car apart. Now, firstly, we put a flat edge onto the block and onto the head, and the flat edge didn't show any distortion whatsoever. We are still going to send the head to a machine shop to measure it perfectly and perhaps give it the lightest tiny skim, but we don't want to take any material out due to the fact that it's an interference engine, i.e. if we move the position of the valves, we could hit pistons. The other thing that we then looked at was the head stud. So on the Yaris, there's actually two different sizes of head stud. They're different thicknesses. The ones around cylinder 2 are actually thicker than the ones on either side of cylinder 1 and 3. Now, we actually ordered brand new head studs from Toyota so we could compare them and look at all the notes, and we couldn't find any stretch, bulging, distortion or any damage to the head studs, and they were tight when we pulled them out. So we have looked at various options. There doesn't seem to be a off-the-shelf, go-in straight away option for the GR Yaris, but we are looking around. If we do decide to use factory head studs to go back in, we'll probably just tighten them up that little bit further. So that brings us to the third thing to check, and that is the head gasket. And it's pretty obvious what's happened with this head gasket is basically the outside of cylinder 2 has basically pushed through into the cooling jacket. And you can just see the wear here where the water actually starts to wear away some of that black material and obviously boost coming through. If you look at it this way, you can see it's a little bit split and distorted in this part of the head gasket compared to the other two cylinders. So basically, it's just pushed through. Now, why did it push through the head gasket? That's the next question that we need to look at. There is no sign of detonation on the pistons at all. There is no sign of detonation on the cylinder head. So there doesn't appear to be any sort of detonation or ignition style event that has caused damage to it. It's not burnt in any way. It's not torn, pushed through or anything. It just looks like it is literally just pushed through the gaps in the multi-layer gasket. Why has it done that? Power. It's a stock gasket, it's stock studs. It's just pushed. We're just finding the limit of the factory stud and gasket. Like, we don't think anything actually went wrong that caused damage that would have been avoidable. We have just reached a point where boost pressure, cylinder pressure and horsepower are just too much for the factory gasket and studs. It's actually not a bad gasket though. When you think about it, it did put up with 37 pound and 362 kilowatts at the hubs. Like it's taken some serious power through it, and we did quite a lot of work on 350 to 360 kilowatts. Hits on the street, the drag strip, dyno, heaps of stuff. Now, is there an aftermarket gasket available? Not that we're aware of, and the problem with this gasket is it's actually not perfectly round. Now, the bore looks perfectly round on the cylinder, but when you look at the head, there's actually little cutouts each corner for where the valves go through. So there is a valve relief cut into the head and the head gasket. This will actually make creating a crush ring style gasket pretty much impossible. Could you fire ring it? Probably, but we're not going to go that serious because we're kind of at the end of how far we want to push this thing anyway. If you're going to go further than we were with a built engine, you may look at fire ringing the actual block instead, because I don't know how an aftermarket head gasket manufacturer is actually going to make something any better than this factory gasket. Nitto has that crush ring, but it's a perfect circle. Could you make a crush ring without a perfect circle? I think that'd be pretty difficult, but making an aftermarket head gasket that's better than factory will be difficult just due to this little relief in every corner, so it's not perfectly round. When we first saw it, it was like, wow, that's a bit of a spin out. But yeah, that's not damage, that is just the shape of the head gasket. So we're just at the point now with the GR Yaris, which is 360 kilowatts at the hubs. How much is that on other dynos around the world? Well, it's enough to go, into the tens, around 126 to 130 mile an hour. Once you're in that region, you do risk doing this. What's our plan from here? Well, we're going to basically make sure the surfaces are completely flat. They look flat on a straight edge. New studs, new gasket. We're going to put Kelford camshafts in, will help relieve the cylinder pressure so we don't have to squeeze the turbo and the amount of boost pressure as hard to make that power. But obviously if you go a bigger turbo than what we have, the engine becomes more efficient and you may not actually push like that, but you still might. Like I said, we're the first people to kind of have this problem, and we don't have anything that we can find that leads us to believe that something happened, some type of ignition event or something we did created the damage. It just looks like the amount of power just pushed through the factory head gasket and studs. So hopefully someone comes up with an aftermarket head gasket and studs for people that want to sort of push even further power. But honestly, when you think about it, the amount of power that we've made and how fast we've already gone with this car on a standard engine with valve springs is incredible. So I don't think the average enthusiast needs to worry about rebuilding their engine. A couple of things we did notice while looking at the engine while it was apart is the walls around the cylinder are massive, and that explains why it's able to handle so much boost pressure and so much power without too much of a problem. That's one thing. There is a little cooling jacket that goes between the cylinders, which is good for cylinder cooling flow. Heaps of coolant flow around the top half of the cylinder to keep it cool, which is really good. And if you have a look at the bottom of the block, the entire bottom quarter of the block actually comes off, and rather than have main caps straight over the crank, the entire bottom part of the block is integrated into the girdle and the main cap. So essentially, well, it has a brace from factory, so a completely integrated main cap, girdle and brace on the bottom. So the area around the crank is very strong. We already know from other videos and other research, the crank in these is fantastic, the rods are very strong, the pistons seem to cope really well. Yeah, incredible engine. The other thing we also noticed, the ports on the inlet are just massive. Think like SR20 VE size. Huge. Exhaust ports are huge. And that explains why this engine can handle so much and can make so much power. It is just a phenomenal little engine. I just wish Toyota would take everything they've done to that and make like a 2.2 litre four-cylinder. That would be sick. But 1.63 cylinder has everything it needs to make power. And we've just reached, I guess, the point at which the factory head gasket and studs are saying, maybe that's enough. But I'm not saying it'll break at exactly that power, but once you sort of get into that 350 kilowatt region and above and into the tens, you do need to worry about after a while, as you heat cycle and stress out the studs and gasket, you could push through like we have. So research and development is what it's all about, so we can find out for you guys exactly how to modify your GR Yaris. So what will be the long-term solution in the aftermarket industry? We'll wait to find out, but for now, we're going to get it back together, get the cams in, get the PPG gear set in, and get back to the track.